Yeah, my name is Chelsea Parker. I'm from Alberta, Canada, right near the Rocky Mountains, kind of, not really. It's like 3 hours away, but whatever. I tell people I'm from the Rockies. Um, I mostly have a platform on Twitter, and by mostly, I mean entirely. And yeah, I write young adult fiction, and currently I'm querying a rom-com.
And then Cindy.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy. I use the she series pronouns. My primary platform is, I don't know, it's like Instagram, Twitter, a mix of that. I'm the editor-in-chief of Outlander, so if you've seen us around, that's me, probably behind all the posts. And I am currently shoving my work in progress, which is like an Asian-inspired cyberpunk novel, through the revision ringer and complaining about it on Twitter the entire time. So nice to meet everyone, and I'm so excited to be here.
And Angel.
So hi, I'm Angel Martinez. I'm based in Manila in the Philippines. I use she, her pronouns, and I freelance for a couple of magazines. So I guess that's my primary platform, but I also mentor aspiring journalists on the side.
And Kayla.
My name's Kayla Kempers. I use she, her pronouns. I write fantasy and sci-fi. I don't have anything published, but I'm hoping to start querying at the beginning of next year. So my main platform is on YouTube. I also dabble a little bit in other platforms, a little bit on TikTok, and a little bit on Instagram, although Instagram is more personal stuff as well. And currently, my main platform is kind of just around documenting the journey of trying to get a manuscript from the idea stage to hopefully published at some point, whether that's traditionally published or self-published or hybrid publishing. So that's kind of what I focus on.
Thank you. And then Birdie.
Hi everyone, I'm Birdie Shea. My pronouns are she, her, and my main platform is on Twitter, though I also like to switch between platforms. So sometimes I'm on TikTok and Instagram too. You can find me as Birdie Not a Bird. Very creative name. And I started querying my YA contemporary novel last week, so that is exciting. And yeah, on Twitter, I'm mostly just like screaming into the void, so that's what I do.
This is a very good question. I looked up when I first started posting this morning because I was curious, and I've been using Twitter since March 2021. And I think I just decided that like I really did want a platform of like-minded people who were sort of working towards the same goals that I was. And for me, that was being a published writer, but also just finding people who were writing books, because like in my personal life, I don't really have friends who, or at the time at least, I didn't really have friends who were trying to write a book or trying to get published. So I really wanted a space where I could meet people who had similar goals to mine. And then also I knew it would be a really good way to connect with people in the industry who maybe weren't necessarily writing a book, but who could help me either get published through like a short story I would write or actual like agents that I wanted to query. So all of those things kind of like came into like me doing Twitter. And I used to be on Stan Twitter, not like it was for 5 seconds of summer, but so I was like familiar with the platform, but I had never used it for like something personal. So that's kind of where I got started with it.
Yeah, like Chelsea said, I think connecting with others is a huge thing for me. Writing is often a very solitary art, and you can feel like you're going crazy as you're just sitting alone in your room, vividly hallucinating these fictional characters and putting them through like traumatizing situations. But I think that when you're surrounded by like-minded people who also have active imaginations and are just as passionate about writing as you are, it becomes something of a summoning circle of inspiration. You'll find that it's so easy to bounce ideas off of one another, share book recommendations like it's no one's business. And it's really going to be an incredible melting pot of perspectives. And I think once you find your people, you'll be able to foster those connections. And that's, for me, a very, very invaluable experience that I've gained through having this platform.
As for me, my main platform is like the magazines that I freelance for. And I started during the pandemic because I was transitioning from publishing on my personal blog about stuff going on in my life during that specific lockdown period. And I was trying to pitch ideas to these places that I had been reading since I was in high school. And uh eventually I branched out to bigger names, so to speak, and the rest is history. But I do agree that when I was starting out with freelancing, it was a pretty solitary experience because I was just writing and reporting directly to an editor. So I guess a lot of that changed when I was looped into a mentorship opportunity by this one organization called the Young Writers Initiative. Someone had reached out to me to ask if I was willing to mentor aspiring journalists for their summer program. And I chose to overcome the imposter syndrome that was plaguing me at the time. And I chose to take that leap. And I feel like it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in recent memory because really getting in touch with fellow creatives and really teaching them, I guess, what I know kind of ignited my passion for mentorship and volunteerism and allowed me to make use of my skill in a special way. And also led me to meet one of my greatest friends who is in this panel with us today. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that inspiration for me to kind of start my writing platform, I guess my trajectory was a tiny bit different because I have had a YouTube platform for a long time that wasn't necessarily focused around writing. But it has always kind of been focused around what I've been doing in my life. So when I was in university, it was kind of focused around that. And then when I started writing again, I kind of came to the realization that it was the main thing that I was doing in my life, and that's not what I was sharing on YouTube. So obviously, in line with everyone else here, I was eager to have some sort of community because I didn't really have people in my life who did creative writing. And I decided, in order to try and find that community, especially when I got back into writing a bit more seriously, that it kind of like the natural trajectory would be to change my YouTube channel again to what I was doing more actively in life, which was really scary because I didn't think writing was something I would ever share ever. So I had already built up a bit of an audience. So I was very, very nervous to do it because I wanted the community, but it's a big overhaul to like switch your audience around, but it's been very well received and I've met so many incredible people. So I am glad that I switched it over.
Well, for me, it was like, just like it kind of happened. I had been on Twitter for quite a while, and suddenly there were these people around me who were talking about writing. And I vividly remember that the first time I noticed that there was a writing community on Twitter was during a PitMath, a pitching event. And I remember seeing all these lovely people talk about their books and being like, oh my God, that's something I can do too. So I kind of impulsively started going more towards the writing Twitter direction with my Twitter account. And well, since last year, I haven't really left. So that's what happened for me. And I'm very grateful for that impulsive decision I actually made because I met some of the loveliest people through Twitter. And it has given me so much faith in my own writing, which I didn't have without my platform. So
I think for me, success definitely has been sort of the connections I've made and the people I've met, because I know like when I went into my writing Twitter account, I like definitely didn't think it would be a platform so much as like follower count and having like a massive amount of followers or anything. but because my main goal was kind of to build those connections and to find friends and those like-minded people, my idea of success, especially at the beginning, was just to find those people. And I definitely think I've been successful because I've made some really, really great friends, and I've been able to hone my own craft into something I'm incredibly proud of. And all of these things that like I wouldn't think that I'd be able to get from twitter.com, but apparently I did. And so I just think that like in that sort of sense, and becoming more confident in myself and my writing and then building connections, that's where I found the most success for myself on my platform.
I'm gonna echo something really profound that we heard from Lee and Blue from the keynote panel this morning. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend viewing it. It was very, very good. I think that it's very easy to get bogged down by the numbers. I remember I used to track every follower and interaction that we got on Outlander and even on my personal accounts until very recently, when I realized that it is highly counterproductive. It does not help. It makes you feel worse about yourself, especially when we live in a world where algorithms kind of punish any signs of inconsistency. Instead, what I've been trying to focus on is just writing the stuff that makes me proud. I want to write the things that are weird and lovely, even if those aren't the most commercial or publishable pieces. As long as I'm making myself proud, I feel like that's success. So being able to write about the things that matter and not worry about anything else, I think is kind of the benchmark of success for me.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with like how we tend to fixate on metrics when we turn our passion into our profession and start to look at it as a source of validation, which is why for me, I make sure to always root what I do in a greater purpose and try to redefine what success means for me. As a writer, I feel like my core like reason for being is to like satisfy curiosity, like instill some sense of clarity through my work and hopefully even incite meaningful change both for myself and others, which is why a lot of the pieces I produce are about, for example, the role of certain aspects of society in world building, and I always try to like probe deeper into why human behavior is the way it is, stuff like that. So for me, my definition of success has always been whether I'm able to walk away from a project with a better understanding of the way the world works and what my place is in the world in general. And another additional like marker of success for me is if I'm able to provide that same like sense of enlightenment in a way to those who have read my work. So yeah.
Yeah, so for me, success, and also to reiterate what everyone has said as well regarding the metrics, I think that when I started, I did get very caught up in that, but I have luckily been able to shift a little bit. And now for me, success as a writer is just continuing to write and continuing to improve my writing, to actually continue working on it and to not get stagnant and I guess kind of like stubborn in the ways that I'm writing. I want to always be learning. So as long as I'm always learning and I'm always moving forward and I'm always improving, then that I think makes me quantifies success for me as a writer. And also, like what Angel said, I think a lot of the times the stories that I write, when I write them or when I pick up a story, it's because it feels like they have some sort of spark in them that I don't really know how to describe besides calling it a spark. But like reading stories has changed my life. So success, like the ultimate success for me as a writer, would be for someone to kind of like have read my story and then send me an email or a letter or something that says like, this story made me really happy, or this story changed the way I thought about this certain thing, or even like I was, having a really tough time and this story just made me laugh. Something like as simple as that, I think really is success to me, just because that's what stories have been for me in the past, and that's what kind of keeps me so attached to them. So yeah, that's how I define success as a writer for myself.
Well, for me, success as a writer, and especially with platforms online, is, as Chelsea said at the start, is really about the connections I make. I found so many lovely people, as I said before, and a lot of people who have better read my book or are now my critique partners, or even just like my best friends. I've met them through Twitter, and having those strong friendships is really what defines success for me. But another factor is definitely bringing comfort and happiness onto Twitter, because Twitter can be pretty negative sometimes. But I really like spreading love there and just making other people feel seen. And yeah, if I can make other people happy or can make other people feel seen, that is what success is for me.
Yeah, I am very grateful that I haven't experienced incredible amounts of negativity toward like writing. Like I think I don't actually think I've been involved, surprisingly, knowing myself. I don't think I've actually been involved in any Twitter fights on my writing platform, Twitter. But I definitely struggle with motivation, and I struggle with maintaining my platform in the sense that like the way I draft is I get an idea and I write an idea within a month, and then I don't write anything for like 10 months. And so during those 10 months when I'm not writing, I feel I struggle a lot to figure out what to post and to how to keep my followers engaged, because I don't feel like I'm doing anything worthwhile, even though I know I am, because rest is incredibly important, especially after doing something as insane as writing an entire book. But I definitely do struggle with sort of maintaining consistent content. And I think, as some of the other panelists have said, like that is just kind of falling into the trap of trying to work the algorithm to my advantage when at the end of the day, my platform is for me at the like most of all. And so I've definitely been trying to work hard on giving myself some leeway and giving myself a break. And if I'm not posting every day, that's fine, as long as what I am posting is meaningful to me and isn't just something I'm trying to churn out for like the masses.
Yeah, retweet on everything that Chelsea just said. Um, I I think that publishing is very interesting in the sense that if you're an author, you're not just a person who writes words down on document. You're also your own social media manager. You represent yourself at panels and interviews, and your job is just so much more than probably what you signed up for it to be. And I think that time management is very difficult because I mean, I could be making like a 3x3 aesthetic again, or I could be working on my manuscript, and actually like, being productive with my time. But I think oftentimes we kind of lose sight of what's truly important. And I guess shifting a little bit, because I also run a magazine, I will not claim to be some kind of all-knowing, holier than thou wizard, but I think it's really been incredible to see how many people are touched by the work that Outlander has done. It has not been easy, certainly, and we're just a team of like 6 people on the executive board running this whole thing, talking about deadlines and trying to churn out revisions, and looking at spreads for so long that our eyeballs feel like they're going to fall out. So I think that's related to what I said initially. I think that's the hardest part, which is kind of trying to juggle this huge endeavor, while also balancing my own writing and passion projects and also being selfless with my time. Of course, this all pays off when I see that like people are touched by the work that we do, and the things that we put our hearts and souls into are impacting them as well. So I don't know, I think it's a very fine line. And this balance has definitely been something that I've been working very, very hard to achieve. And it hasn't been easy the whole time. So I think it's a lot of test and trial to try to figure out, okay, like this is the stuff that I'm passionate about, and this is like relaxing to me, versus the things that like are not very productive to my own mental well-being, and those can be dropped. So yeah, I don't know if that actually answered it, but yeah.
For me as a freelancer, there still is this kind of underlying pressure to keep churning out content, like to be always on top of what's happening lately in terms of international affairs or pop culture, and to be like one of the first or the most distinct voices to produce a hot take, because I feel like I didn't experience this kind of pressure before, but once I felt more eyes on me, like actually tuning into my work, and when I realized that editors can actually find you based on the pieces that you produce, I felt like I didn't want to let them down, and I kept wanting to like unlock all of these opportunities for myself as well. And it once came to a point where I succumbed to the pressure and I ended up producing pieces of pretty subpar quality. Like it was over a week and I made 3 essays that I wasn't proud of at all. And I had to learn my lesson the hard way, like when I saw them published and I read through them, and I figured that this is not the kind of work that I would be proud of. Like that's when I knew that I had to kind of like take a step back and nurture myself back to like creative health again. I was reading, I was having conversations with friends, which are a lot of things that I overlooked or neglected when I was constantly churning out work. So I guess the key for me to like overcome that, I can't really say that I've overcome it completely, but one thing that I keep in mind so that I don't succumb to the pressure again is to kind of remember what's important to me and why I write in the first place. Since I know that I want my words to enact some sort of change in the lives of my readers, they need to be able to read words that are actually written thoughtfully and intentionally so that they can create the kind of impact I want. So yeah, those that was the main challenge that I faced as a freelancer, and one that I still try to work my way through today. So yeah.
I think I feel like I have a bunch of challenges, but yeah, so like the consistency is a big thing, which is kind of unfortunate for all artists who are trying to build some sort of platform. Is that creativity generally can't be forced, and it's very difficult to make things that you're proud of over and over again, and on a consistent schedule, which in turn obviously will affect how well you're doing, because all of the algorithms on every platform, to my knowledge, does favor consistency. But sometimes, you know, if you're in a slower stage of writing, it's difficult to actually be able to figure out what you want to put out. So I think that that's definitely a challenge that I've come across as well, because it is like the feeling that I need to prioritize my platform as much as writing, if not more sometimes, which is not good, because if I'm not writing, then there isn't anything to post about on my platform. And I think it's obviously difficult across the board, but it's also, I guess, almost another challenge is like imposter syndrome, especially. And I think, like I said, I think that it's similar no matter what you're creating, but I think there's like another nuance to it when you're writing long form. So for example, when you're writing a novel, it's not a short process. And if you are not published and you're not actively, you know, showing your work to people, it's difficult, because you can go multiple years not ever knowing if it's any good, but then still trying to make content about it. And I think that's a really difficult mental space to work through when you're putting yourself publicly on these platforms, but no one's ever actually read your work. So you could have an incredible story, or you could have a story that you know needs a lot of work, and you'll never really know until you've actually published it, or worked with a critique partner, or found your community, which a lot of the time, you know, it takes a bit of time building your platform to actually find that community. So that's a challenge that I have run into and regularly run into probably on a daily basis, is just being like, just this uncomfortable feeling of talking about my work and projects that I feel so inspired by and so excited by, but no one has any proof that they, you know, live up to the potential that I see in them, basically. So that's really, really tough. So that is a challenge, but I think that's why it's so important to be passionate and to really care about your stories, because for a long time, especially at the beginning, you are the only believer in them. So you have to, like, you really have to hold on to that. So yeah.
I definitely agree with everything Kayla said. Like, the imposter syndrome is horrible, especially if you have so many people excited for your book, because then you have all these expectations to live up to, and like, writers are insecure human beings, I would say. So we always question if we could live up to those expectations. But another challenge I definitely run into is the thing of being perceived, basically. Like, I have 4,000 followers on Twitter right now, which is something I never thought would happen, because I didn't start tweeting stuff to build a platform. I started tweeting stuff to make friends, and now I have all these people watching me, and it is pretty scary to be perceived. So definitely the thing I notice these days is that before I post something on Twitter, I am always like thinking it over 10,000 times. And that is definitely a challenge, because sometimes that ends up meaning not tweeting something I want to tweet. And yeah, it is hard sometimes to be perceived, but it does pay off sometimes. So we live with it.
I think the biggest thing is don't let, I think Cindy said this earlier, but don't let the numbers bog you down. Like, it's so important to realize that when you're creating a writing platform, the only way you're going to have fun with it and the only way you're actually going to get something out of it is if you're doing it for yourself and you're not doing it for anyone else. And so I think my biggest piece of advice, and something I wish I had learned like a lot earlier, was that my writing at the end of the day, like, is for me, and I'm writing the stories that I wanted to see when I was growing up. And that's more important than having whatever 10,000 followers or however many followers you aim to have. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah. Like I said, and like Chelsea said, don't look at the numbers. We are book people. We look at the words. We don't like math. Don't do that to yourself. Just always remember that the writing comes first, and everything else, like making your aesthetic boards, making those reels and doing advice columns, all of that comes second. It doesn't matter if you're not cherishing your own work and making sure that your art is what's coming first. So yeah, we're book people, focus on the words.
One piece of advice I can give is to not follow the common advice given to job seekers that if you do what you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. It's easy for us to become a slave to our writing and to think that it's normal to sacrifice everything we have and everything we are just to make sure that we keep at our craft. But I feel like if we continue to adopt this mindset, we just put so much unnecessary pressure on our art that we might end up hating it in the end. So for me, it's just like, don't be afraid to admit that you're tired as a writer, that you need to take a break, you need to take a step back to kind of like refuel yourself and your creative juices. So if I could sum that up in a sentence, don't allow like external forces or internal pressures to kind of like lessen your love for writing. So yeah.
I second everything previously said. All great advice. I think that the advice that I would give is almost to, which is kind of funny because if for this question, is to kind of take advice with a grain of salt, especially on writing platforms like Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everything. A lot of people on these platforms give, writing advice and tips and say what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And a lot of them come with an air of authority almost, especially if they're larger creators. And some people just speak with an air of authority, which is great, and they're very confident, but always remember when you're getting into those environments and that kind of community that you don't actually have to do what everyone else is saying. A lot of that stuff isn't going to work for you, whether it's writing tips or tips on creating content around writing or just tips on creating content in general. There's always, you will always do it your way, or you should always do it your way. And that is what will be the most fulfilling for you. That's what will work the best for you. It will keep you from getting drained too quickly. So just, I think it's the kind of like, don't believe everything you see or hear on the internet. take everything with a grain of salt. You don't have to listen to people's advice if you don't think it's going to work for you. So yeah, that's my advice. And you don't have to listen to it if you don't want to.
I'm gonna say the most cliched advice ever, probably. Be yourself. It sounds so obvious, but something I had to learn is that if I'm not myself, people are not gonna engage with my content, I guess, because they're not engaging with me. So at the start of my writing platform, I wanted to be so professional and be like someone people could look up to. It didn't work. Not at all. So my advice is to literally just be yourself, put your voice into everything. I know finding your voice is hard, but put your voice in it and people will like that. I'm a very enthusiastic person, and I have noticed that by being my little too enthusiastic self sometimes, people really gravitate towards that. And something I've heard so many times from people who first thought I was this big writing creator to being my friends is that they say, you are so yourself. You are the exact same person I see on my timeline. And that is something I really love to hear, of course, but it is also my number one advice. Be yourself, have fun. It will be all right.
Yeah, I am at Chelsea G Parker everywhere. I'll also drop it in the chat. And if you have any questions, my DMs are open. Yeah.
My Instagram and Twitter are at Cindy Tran Writes. I will also drop it in the chat. And Outlander's handle is just Outlanderzine, both on Twitter and Instagram.
My usernames are really hard to say out loud, so I literally just dropped it in the chat along with my portfolio if ever you want to see the work that I publish in other magazines. So yeah.
My name or my username is at Kayla Kempers across the board, anywhere that I exist. I don't post much on Twitter though. It's just me complaining about TV shows and stuff. You can still follow me if you want, but I don't really post book stuff there.
And I'm Birdie Not a Bird everywhere, mainly on Twitter, but also on Instagram and TikTok. And my DMs are also always open if anyone wants to chat or just be friends.